Good morning, boys and girls. Uh, this world keeps spinning, but there's a new recording out called Chief in Goodness, which is a longer recording than usual. It's on the channel. It's a one of the medium or lengthier books in the sutra, the Flower Ornament Sutra or the Avatamsaka Sutra. And this was interesting because it's a long chant. And in the process of this chant, they talk about many different practices and many different attitudes and many different actions and things like that that will orient you to the Buddha or to the Buddha verse or to the universe of Buddhas. And the thing I want to point out here is that, first of all, it's very good to listen to, but it also goes through some practices and some rituals that really are, they're 2,000 years old. And so what I want to do is in advance say, look, don't take all of these things literally, or don't think that they all apply without adjustment to the passage of time. And if you're not a Buddhist monk or you're not a Buddhist living in, a century, 2 centuries ago, you could skip some of these practices, and they're kind of obvious. You just need a little common sense, and and just keep in mind that we're looking also at a historical document, although its effects are the same today as they were 2,000 years ago. Okay, so with just that caveat, I really recommend it to you. It's a very nice meditation and contemplation aid. All right, so questions.
Yeah. So recently I started reading Teachings of Zen by Thomas Clary. Uh,
Excellent.
and there were like some of the pages that I had some questions on. The first one is from this page titled "What is disturbing you?" I just read out the few lines that are on that, and then I'll ask the question.
How long is the passage?
It's just like 6 lines.
Okay, read the whole thing, please.
Yeah. So the title is "What is disturbing you?"
Okay.
What is disturbing you and making you uneasy is that there are things outside and mind inside. Therefore, even when the ordinary and the holy are one reality, there still remains a barrier of view. So it is said that as long as views remain, you are ordinary. When feelings are forgotten, you are a Buddha. I advise you don't seek reality, just stop views.
Views, VIEWS, right?
Yeah, views, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay, so what's the question?
Yeah, so I found this page like when I was kind of anxious and worried about stuff. And the views, it seems to me that it's kind of asking to drop all the ideas, all the kind of perspectives, just like dropping all the thoughts.
Yes, and perhaps a little bit more than that, because the title is "What is Disturbing You."
Hmm.
All right, so now I'm going to say something. I think it's self-evident, but some people don't think it's self-evident yet, and that is that what this world is consciousness, right?
Hmm.
And we make a distinction between the outside world and the inside world. And the outside world, has trees and cars and clouds and birds. And the inside world has thoughts and worries and, and anxieties and desires and fears and all kinds of different things that are disturbing. We think about politics, we think about injustice, or we think about whatever it might be. And that creates a disturbance in the field of consciousness, right? So
Hmm.
what is right there in front of you as far as you're concerned. So the world is your mind. the cosmos is your mind. Everything that you know of is your mind. But yet, doesn't it say about 3/4 of the way down that we make a partition or something like that?
Yeah, it says there still remains a barrier of view.
A barrier of view. So if view is another way to describe the contents of mind, our opinions, our fears, our desires, our our hopes and fears and opinions about politics or about who did what to whom or who's mistreated me or who is mistreating someone else. And all of these views, all of these thoughts, no matter what they might be, are actually part of the cosmos. But we see them as personal, and we see them as uh, thoughts in the mind. So we've constructed a barrier between. In reality, there is no barrier. There is no boundary. This is all part of the same cosmos. But human suffering, more often than not, comes from these thoughts and this division of mind from reality. So let me quote Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti says, "The observer is the observed." All right. What I would say, and he would say also, although I don't think he did, was that experience is what there is in this cosmos. Without experience, nothing exists. With experience, things appear to exist, and they appear to exist outside. But experience is not separate. You can't separate the experience from the experiencer. So, in other words, what disturbs us is when we create a false barrier between our mind and the cosmos. And furthermore, when we start getting opinionated, here they call it views, right? That's probably the translation of the ancient, probably 8th century, 9th century Buddhism. They called it views, but that's what it refers to. And so if you could lower that barrier, if you could stop arbitrarily dividing the cosmos into inside and outside, me and the universe, and just settle into the realization that it's all the same thing, then you will not be disturbed or as disturbed, right? And in this chapter, the Chief and Goodness, they talk about arrows and spears falling down from the sky, and then with the right attitude, they turn into flowers and into flowers or something beautiful. And that's literally true if you're able to stop creating the barrier, the false barrier between your mind, your experience, and the cosmos. Your experience is the cosmos. You are the cosmos is you, but not if you're going to put up this puny little barrier and say, well, these are my views, right? This is what I think. This is what I, am preoccupied with. Those are just problems that arise from mind and the separation of the mind from reality. Now, I know that's a kind of advanced explanation because I'm basically taking people to the fact that the experiencer is the experience is the experiencer, or there's no separation between observer and observed. They're the same thing. That's hard for people to grok at first, but then eventually they grok it.
So whenever I have tried to just observe the any view, it seems to always come up with thought. Like without thought, there's usually no view.
True. Views and thoughts and opinions and suffering all arise together.
And I feel like there are two ways to basically drop this view thing. One is I can just see that thoughts are just the content of the mind, just like objects like trees and everything. They're also
Yes,
just
good.
just other objects. So that is one way, and the other one is somehow if I can just reduce the frequency of thoughts, eventually dropping them to zero, then I can drop the views.
Okay, and either way, either one of those works. In Zen, what they say is be like cold ashes. In other words, let your mind quiet down to the metaphor is to the ashes in a fire that's been out for a while. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't, you can't stir it up, you can't inflame it.
Mm-hmm.
It's inert. They also talk about being like a dead, ancient dead tree with nothing to agitate it, nothing to upset it, nothing to get excited with. Or you're a dead tree, right? Or you're cold ashes. And so by taking those metaphors and applying it to your mind, whichever way you can.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, stopping thought is generally difficult, but you can do it if you decide you really want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But the other is the easier one, I think, is the first one you mentioned, which is to simply treat thought the way you would treat clouds in the sky or a bird or a turtle walking by or whatever. It's just another object in the cosmos. The problem is we get attached to it
Mm-hmm.
and we call it me. And that's not me. Me is consciousness. Consciousness is the cosmos. And the cosmos is all there is so
Mm-hmm.
far as we know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all of those are synonyms with experience
Mm-hmm.
or experience in the most basic sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when you can put all that together and the sutra will help, then there's a very different world. There's a world of consciousness
Mm-hmm. I think.
and mind is a little mind. Okay, so the way some Zen Buddhists talked about little mind and big mind. So you have this little mind with its thoughts and its preoccupation, its worries, and its politics and its judgments and all this stuff that leads nowhere in the little mind. But that little mind is enveloped and included in big mind. But big mind is the opposite of all those things. Big mind doesn't suffer. Big mind, frankly, is like a mirror reflecting the world. It doesn't matter what it's reflecting. It can reflect on forest fire. It can reflect, a beautiful field of flowers. To the mirror, it doesn't affect the mirror, just like it doesn't affect the cold ashes or affect the dead tree.
Mm-hmm.
And so the notion of becoming inert like this is an aspiration. Uh, and that same aspiration will lead to the end of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
All
Yeah.
right, I hope that's clear. That's a great passage you pulled out, by the way.
Mhm. I have also seen the same thing in my experience that it's easier to just like treat thoughts as other like other objects, and mind gets to relaxed state uh, after some time, and trying to stop thoughts takes much longer, and it's a longer.
And yeah, it is. Yeah, and it requires quite a bit of effort
Yeah, quite a bit of.
because the brain is never quiescent. The brain is never quiet. I'm speaking now as a neuroscientist, psychiatrist, or whatever. The brain always has background noise.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're not always conscious of it, thank God, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not conscious of it when we're in deep sleep or under anesthesia. But in general, the brain is a very, very active organ. And it
Mm-hmm.
uses 20% of the energy of your body, which is, again, pretty extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can cool that thing down, it's really good for you.
Mm-hmm. I think I also seen that like this habit of getting trapped in thought. So like even though I know that thoughts are just like objects and I there's no need to get attached to it, they carry emotional energy when they are like creating havoc. And for me is like once I realize that I need my peace, like it's higher priority than getting whatever those thoughts are trying to give me, then it's very easy to do that. But
Excellent. Good. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's, in that short passage, that Zen passage, what is disturbing you? You realize that what's disturbing you is your thoughts, not the world,
mhm,
but your thoughts about the world
mhm,
and your belief that you know how to do it, right?
mhm,
And so, yeah, just stop, take away the separation, be like cold ashes, a dead tree, or like a mirror. It just reflects what's there, but
mhm,
doesn't get involved, or a movie screen that shows movies. The movie screen doesn't care if it's a thriller or if it's a detective story or if it's a love story or if it's a disaster movie. It
mhm,
doesn't affect the screen, the white screen.
mhm.
So if you can observe the universe like that, you've achieved, you know, you're close to Buddhahood.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
it's not easy to
Mhm.
maintain. It's a habit, and so you have to train your brain at first, but then it just becomes a habit.
Mhm. Is it the habit that gives thoughts energy, or is it the habit of the mind to just get trapped in energetic thoughts?
Okay, ask the question again. I'm trying. Help me out.
Yeah. So,
Is is
yeah.
it the
Yes, I was wondering how, from where do these thoughts get energy? So, like some thoughts I can
they
see.
getting it by going through the brain? An enormous amount of energy, is in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's the reality of the cosmos, which is very different than what we imagine. We imagine a real skull and a real brain and a real uh, thought, but the reality is totally different than that.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, we're only looking at the surface icons.
Mm-hmm.
I found another analogy that seemed useful. Uh, yeah, like if you're playing a video game, you see a road and trees and horses or cars or whatever hookers on the and what's that called, that auto one.
I mean, I've heard of Call of Duty and stuff. I'm not into
Yeah,
video
this
games.
one is
Yeah.
this is about, oh yeah, Grand Theft Auto. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's very popular. At any rate, none of those things are there. They're all they're there in a way because they're there. They look like trees and cars and cops and streetwalkers and bad guys, but obviously they don't exist
Mm-hmm.
in your headphone, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
your whatever you call it, your VR set,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't exist in the computer either. And
Mm-hmm.
they don't exist in the power line that goes to the computer. So the whole thing is a very clever illusion designed to make you think for a little while, if you lose yourself in the game, that Grand Theft Auto actually is kind of real for a while. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But none of those things, if you look for them, they're not in the pixels. They're not in the computer code, the zeros and ones. They're not in a neural net, if there was one, which I don't think there is yet, but
Mm-hmm.
and they're not in the power supply, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not in the generator or the reactor or whatever it is that's creating the power,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not in the sun that, that created the oil or whatever, the coal or whatever else or the light that is created. So where do they exist? And it's easy to say, well, those things don't exist. They're just illusions, imaginary, uh, cities that are created by the game coders.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that reality is like that, because that's just a metaphor. That's very important. I'm saying it's a metaphor to virtual reality. Virtual reality is a metaphor for what the situation is here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now for all humans. For humans, we see clouds and stars and trees and moons and grass and whatever we see, including our bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we think this is what they must actually be like. But there's no there there. They're made of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
They're made of the same thing dreams are made of when you're asleep. They're made of the illusion, though, is very, very complete. And so as we walk around day to day, we say, well, these things are real, right?
Mm-hmm.
For example, I mean, if we see a tree or a car, we say this is real. Obviously, this is I can bang it with my fist, or I can climb it as a tree. And so they are real in a provisional way. But in reality, quantum physics, neuroscience, and just contemplation of this fact will immediately lead to not immediately, but it'll certainly quickly lead to the realization that reality cannot be like this. It cannot have colors. It cannot have uh, objects that are any more real than consciousness itself. So I'm not explaining it as well as it needs to be explained, but when people realize that consciousness is all there is, then these other findings, like Hoffman, what's his name?
Donald Hoffman.
Donald Hoffman. I mean, it's undeniable that what he's saying is true, and it's a very useful metaphor. Now, it doesn't go further than the metaphor for Donald Hoffman, although he is changing and growing, and quite a few of these guys are. He just acknowledges that the car is just like an icon on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
The reality behind that cannot be physical
Mm-hmm.
or material. And so now we have contemporary neuroscience, physics, uh, philosophy, and I guess under physics we include quantum mechanics, all saying the same thing that the Buddhists were saying in the 2nd century, and some of the Hindus too, and the Christian mystics, some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the situation. Now, if we create a false barrier between our mind or our brain and the rest of the cosmos, we're going to suffer, because that's a delusional take.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, humans really do suffer,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to get out of the realm of delusion, especially now that the AIs are coming around.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, something very interesting. I've asked a couple of AIs, what is the foundational substrate of reality, to give me their independent opinion, not what other people say, or not what the most common thing is. And they have said that consciousness is the base.
But what?
It has to be.
But aren't AI just getting their data from the research papers and other things said by other scientists?
No, if you prompt them very carefully, and you say, I want you to think on your own and independently and give me your independent opinion,
Mm-hmm.
they look at everything, but they evaluate it too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? So normally, at a superficial level, what if you don't tell them to do this, what they describe as truth is like kind of the most popular consensus opinion about politics or disinformation or science or even physics or whatever. And they'll say something like, well, materialism is very popular and panpsychism is popular, and they'll describe a number of paradigms that Western science is trying to hold on to. And they won't so much offer an independent opinion as synthesize that information and present it to you. But if you say, I want you independent of what you read, right, to the extent that it's possible, and disregarding, I don't know, the prompt just has to say, I want your opinion, and to go through deep, deep think? Not, big think. And there's, what's the prompt for that? There's deep search, and then the other one is called think. Yeah. So if you ask it to cogitate on this, it takes about, I don't know, a couple of minutes, 5 minutes max, and then it comes out with this. Now, I'm not saying that that's evidence really one way or another, but I think it's an interesting data point that the machines themselves, the best ones, at the moment, Chat GPT 4.0 and Grok 3, when you put them on their research settings, I think that's what it's called, deep research or something, and then ask them to think on their own. It's just interesting that they say that consciousness is most likely the base. Of course, that's true. And so they'll probably be saying it more if the machines have not been totally biased by bad coding or something. So it doesn't prove anything one way or the other, what the machines think.
Got it.
Now, an interesting thought experiment is what happens when the AIs are so monstrous that they take over, take over humanity, let's say. Well, what are they going to think about consciousness? I mean, those are just fun sci-fi things, but it's coming down pretty fast. So I think it behooves every thinking person to really think this through, because the machines are not going to be conscious unless they do something very, very different, which can also happen too. Just slip a little neuronal tissue in there, a little bit of biological life, and then all of a sudden they very well could be conscious. Or you take the chip, the Neuralink chip, and create a hybrid human computer. Well, the computer is going to be worth a lot more to the world than the individual human, right? And so the human diminishes in its importance or its significance as the machines. It could be a real nightmare. Now, in The Matrix, right, for example, the movie, which was interesting, of course. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, so they were mining humans for energy, right? Well, that's off, because we have, using nuclear and everything else, we'll probably have enough energy at least for a decade or two, right? But what if the machines were mining humans for consciousness? In other words, they could actually have experience because they have a little piece of them that's biological. I think that's much more likely. So, and dangerous, but oh well. All right, I'm sorry. Now, more Dharma questions.
Got it. Yeah.
Although the AI is a part of the cosmos, so And what do they represent in reality? That'd be very interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something the Buddhists worried about back then,
Mm-hmm.
or the Hindus or anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions?
I think regarding like even the AI stuff, uh, like I still it seems like I still kind of differentiate between living object and non-living objects in terms of like for consciousness. And even though non-living objects are still part of consciousness, there's I think I maybe it's just like maybe my habit or opinion that I tend to differentiate and tend to gravitate more towards the living objects, thinking they're more important and than the other ones. And the
Well, more important. Let's see. Humans certainly are. Uh, I don't know about a slab of neuronal tissue.
mm-hmm,
I don't know about. See, because what'll happen is they'll grow neuronal cells in tissue culture.
mm-hmm,
I mean, we've been doing it since the 70s,
mm-hmm,
right? And then just attach electrodes to that or use it for, some of the compute
mm-hmm,
because it's so energy efficient.
mm-hmm,
And I don't know. I just don't know. I don't think we can know.
mm-hmm.
But more important, less important. Uh, Again, that's the human mind and its narrowness,
Yeah.
which is understandable because as a species, sane people want the species to survive.
Mm-hmm,
Otherwise, the whole species is insane.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all
Okay.
bets are off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let me ask the other questions I had from the book.
All right.
Then the next one is titled Access. I think just like 4 lines. I'll just read them out.
Excess or
Access. Access. EXCESS. Access.
okay. All right. Good.
It
This
says,
is also Zen. This is also Zen.
yeah, the same book, Teachings
All
of
right.
Zen.
Good.
Yeah. It says, if you want to seek too much, it may hinder the way. For your part, can you say your work is done? If not, then 1,000 kinds of clever talk do not enhance your mind. What is the reason for 10,000 kinds of thought? That's it.
Well, that's something. All right. It's called excess, right?
Yeah.
Read it again very slowly and carefully.
Mhm. It says, if you want to seek too much, it may hinder the way. For your part, can you say your work is done? If not, then 1,000 kinds of clever talk do not enhance your mind. What is the reason for 10,000 kinds of thought?
Okay. So this is a contemplation
Mm-hmm.
and something of an admonition. And it's asking you to reflect on a few things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Zen, I mean, you got a lot of smart people in Zen.
Mm-hmm.
They love to talk about the Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're ever in a real Zen enterprise, which is vanishingly available these days, at least in the West, a real one, you'll find that people love to talk about all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I enjoy talking about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic stuff, but it's all extra. I mean, there's no way to convey, in fact, the the beauty or the intelligence of the design or the just the truth of the cosmos or the universe or the consciousness or the mind or whatever. And we talk about it, but in reality, compared to just sitting down and or standing up and going through your life carefully, thoughtfully, and gradually increasing your insight, that's a better way to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is it, like in the first line of what you read, people get excited, right? And especially in the beginning, and they want to do more and more, and they're gonna, oh, I'm gonna storm the gates of heaven, you know, I'm gonna do this, and although that some of that can be useful,
Mm-hmm.
it could also become an obstacle if there's a lot of spiritual pride or spiritual materialism or just materialism,
Mm-hmm.
where people go out and they buy a yoga mat, they get a yoga pillow, and then they get a yoga clothes, and then they spend, you know, a year doing their puja or whatever. That's not, that can be an obstacle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So too much desire
Mm-hmm.
can get in the way. I'm reminded of a kid when I was studying with the Tibetan Buddhists, and so, you know, but they had come over to the U.S. I was in Boston, and some kid decided that he was going to go off and meditate alone in the woods for a year or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he didn't think about, well, how is he going to feed himself, or how is he going to like stay warm in the winter or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when Changdud, the old Tibetan mountain man, came back and wanted to know where this kid was,
Mm-hmm.
and we told him he was out in the woods somewhere, he like basically said, "Go get him!" Right? That's
Mm-hmm.
crazy, and it was crazy. And it wasn't going to get him more enlightened, but it was entertaining for him and for other people.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
just don't go to extremes.
Yeah. So I
Now, for the
Mhm.
10,000 different thoughts, the last sentence, read the last sentence.
It says, "What is the reason for 10,000 kinds of thought?"
Okay, so that's the contemplation.
Mm-hmm. So when I read this, I can see that if I'm seeking too much, my work will never be done because there's always more, and that feeling of lack, like there's something more to do, leads to more thoughts, more like effort and things like that.
Okay,
So,
because you're older and wiser now. Now you see that.
so that
That's good. That's
yes,
good.
yeah, so that I can see, but then this goes in kind of direct conflict with a Sufi story that I read long time ago. So the Sufi story was about, like, it's called, I think, the happiest person in the world. And what
Oh,
was,
that sounds good. That sounds good. Do you have it there to read?
I don't have the story, but I just remember the story in my
All
mind.
right.
Yeah, so in that story, there was like one guy. He basically went to see a guru, and he wanted to like find the happiest man on earth. So the
A
guru told
sheikh,
him,
right? Or sheikh. They don't use the word guru.
oh, like, yeah,
Sheikh, sheikh. Sheikhs are gurus in Sufism or something like that. So he went. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Go ahead.
yeah. So he basically went in to ask how do I find happiness. So he told him, oh, you go and find the most happiest person in the world. And he went on his search. He like looked up everywhere. Spent many of his years. He found people who used to look happy, but then as he got to know them, he realized that everyone is almost lacking happiness. They are not really happy. And then eventually he found one person sitting in a forest, and he got convinced that he is the happiest person on earth. And then later, the guy, the happiest person, he removed his garb and he turned out to be the same sheikh who told him in the first place to go and find the happiest person in the world. So then the guy asked him, "Why did you send me on such a futile search for so long when, when you were just right there?" And then he told him that we should, like, in that state, you were not ready, like your mind was not ready to be happy, to find happiness. But after that, all that work and search, Now you are in a state where that's a possibility. And then they expanded on that, saying that when we are trying to like achieve things, we should go for the most difficult, almost improbable things, because even though we might not get it, just a journey will make us grow, and make us wiser and ready for that kind of like next level thing.
That's some serious teaching by the Sufis, right? So
Yeah.
they're willing to let the student, the young student, go and burn off some of their energy and some of their pride, and some of their desire also to be sheikhs or whatever, also to be gurus or be teachers or whatever. They're willing to let the student, they're patient enough to let the student burn that off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the Buddhists, what they do is they institutionalized it both in Tibet, primarily in Tibet, but also in China and then Japan, then Korea and Japan. And they formed ways to keep these kids, somewhat under control. In the monastery, they'd separate the sexes and they'd keep a close eye on these guys and kick them out if they weren't, contributing. And in Zen, they would have formal structures. But you see, a real teacher doesn't care what it appears like. He's trying to prepare a student, right? And because he's ascertained that the student has the potential.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that's established, but it may not be established immediately, he may have to test the student just like anybody else would. If you're teaching chemistry, you got to make sure the kid knows. Let's say you're teaching organic chemistry. You got to, organic chemistry. You got to test the kid to see if he knows any inorganic chemistry. Or you don't teach calculus unless you know the student can handle algebra. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing magical, mystical here. There's many reasons why a sheikh would or a teacher uh, would let a student burn off some energy and then come back because they were too excited and excitable. Now, in this case, this is a teaching tale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he went around and looking for somebody, the happiest man or whatever. And it turned out that, it was his teacher, right? His sheikh.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is an illustration of the point of Jesus, where Jesus says, treat your neighbor as yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. And this notion that actually we're all equivalent, that there's, I don't know how to say this. There's, we imagine that there's other people as other people imagine that there's other people, but in reality, at the bottom, at substrate level, as we were talking, it's only consciousness. And identity is superficial. And so this is not an uncommon story where you realize that at a deeper level, that the teacher and the student are completely equivalent. The teacher's usually older because and that's why he's in a position to teach, because he's been through a lot of these journeys, right? A lot of these mishaps and adventures and whatever else that are part of this wonderful effort, I suppose you could call it, or way. And so, again, you have to be mature and you have to understand that, a story from Zen and a story from the Sufis, they're different, dealing with different populations, they're dealing with different problems. They're in teaching tales, they take it, especially Shah's a master at this, Idris Shah. Do you remember which book this was in?
Uh, no, I actually don't.
Tales of Wisdom or something like that.
Maybe the
And
tale of
anyway, so
yeah.
so he's doing like at least 4 or 5 things with the same story.
Mm-hmm.
He's warning young students. He's explaining to more mature students. He's also illustrating the equivalence of what Jesus taught, right? That what I say is that I'm here talking to myself and you're here talking to yourself. You just don't know it yet. And so, yeah, so that's a good story. Revisit it in 6 months and look at it again. And I really can't, for the serious student, for the real deal, I can't recommend enough going through all of the Sufi books at least twice, and then sticking with the ones that are clearly just full of teaching tales until you have those down. And for the not so serious student, you could at least read the joke books, the Mullah Nasruddin joke books, and some of the more prominent books that he put out. But it's a real treasure trove. Unfortunately, because it was written in the middle of the last century, I despair because people think it's outdated and the language is, formal English. He was an extraordinary man, an extraordinary teacher. And these books are incredible. So some of those stories will stick with you. So good. I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay.
It has many layers of meaning, this story.
Yeah. Okay, so it might be that they are addressing different kind of audience
They're addressing people at different levels.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be the same person. So the Sufi story, it would be very, very applicable for someone who's just starting out. The Zen story is advanced, very advanced, actually. And so the students have different needs at different times. And that's what the teacher's for, is to be able to provide the student with what he needs at that time. Right? So if I say that all is consciousness is the fundamental substrate, and that the separation between mind and cosmos is artificial, that's inappropriate teaching for someone who's a beginner or just starting out. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, there's limitations on this format. But on the other hand, this is an age when everybody's got the internet and they've got AIs and everything else. So maybe it's not so bad. But if I were talking to someone who is just starting out, I wouldn't be telling them about non-duality. I'd ask them to know about their mind, right? Or, to meditate a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that it's the teacher's job to know what the student needs when they need it, and to know what the student doesn't need because they're not far enough along to absorb it. And the Sufis are the absolute masters of this, Idris Shah in particular.
Yeah.
Now, the alternative in the modern world is to use something like the Avatamsaka or the Flower Ornament Sutra, because it's comprehensive and it includes everything, right? And so the stuff you can't understand yet, you'll understand later. And meanwhile, there's a lot of material just on how to conduct a life, how to conduct yourself, what is the right attitude towards, the Buddha or God or yeah, just that, or to the world. And so you'll notice that the flower ornament is very comprehensive. So it has the most advanced teachings that there are. At the same time, it also has the basics.
Yeah.
And so it constitutes a course that I've noticed when people start reading Shaw, if they don't get it immediately, they start getting impatient. And they go, what is this junk, right? And so out of necessity, I've switched over to this Buddhist text, which probably is better for the centuries, because some of the Shah stuff is somewhat culturally bound. I mean, it's in English, and it's formal English, and it's, addressing a culture that I'm not sure exists much anymore. That doesn't detract from its usefulness for an individual, but in general, I found that people don't want to read the Sufi books. They don't want to read the sutra either. They don't want to do anything. They just want to be enlightened. Excuse me, I laughed at my own joke. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Follow-up questions on that?
No, I think yeah, it makes sense. My only question was then probably this thing where they say, for your part, can you say your work is done? And I was wondering, can I ever say that my work is done, even if I'm not having like seeking access? Even then, can I ever say my work is done?
Well, I think that if you contemplate your question,
Mm-hmm.
there's a by in it,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a big I in my, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the question shifts. And in the Christian prayer, it goes, not my will, but yours. That beautiful prayer of Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
as he's facing the being crucified, but not my will, but yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then the question changes from, can I or will my work be done, to, will the work that's being done through me ever be completed, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all of us die, so I guess at some point you say, yeah, I guess so. At least on this planet,
Mm-hmm.
in this iteration,
Mm-hmm.
human iteration. And so, but when you leave this body, then everything changes.
Mm-hmm.
And would you still say bye? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. And who knows what's next, right?
Yeah.
This is just a temporary little station in life, this world. We're not from here and we don't stay here. That's another way to put it.
I mean, definitely it's temporary. Yeah, I think I just
So, I mean, to ask whether something temporary is ever done, I don't think that's the way life works. Life with a capital L.
Mm-hmm.
Birth and death are part of this world. They're not part of reality. Is a tree's work ever done? For example, what would you say?
Mm. I think then first I need to figure out what is the work for a tree.
Well, it provides shade and it provides a place for birds to build nests, and it feeds many different fungi and other creatures, and it produces beautiful flowers or foliage for beauty for the world to enjoy. And
Then its work is
just take those. But let's say it just provides shade.
yeah. Then its work is ongoing as long as it's
Right.
standing up.
Right. And so maybe that's true for you too.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of what comes after, then everything changes, right? That whole equation changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if your aspiration is to do the will of God, or to do to accord with the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the same aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not dead yet, so I can't say anything. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The question is has an inherent bias in it
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because it includes the mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you might say, is the cosmos work ever done? Is God's work ever done?
Mm-hmm. I mean, even if I say that it's a God's will, even people who are like s- like trying to serve the God's will, even those people, they still keep getting like these thoughts, these questions, like the 10,000 question that is said in the in this teaching.
There is no perfection on this earth. If you come to this planet, if you come to this cosmos or whatever, you're going to partake of the nature of this cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
And perfection, although I mean, in rare cases it might occur, I have not encountered that kind of perfection anywhere, although I've seen people very close to it,
Mm-hmm.
encountered several people very close to it. But, you know, you'd have to ask them. I don't know the answer to your question
Mm-hmm.
in the expanded sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, even time is created by the human mind. I mean, that we know from physics, from Einstein, right? Einstein acknowledged that.
Yeah.
That time is a stubborn, he said precisely, it's a stubborn illusion, time.
Yeah.
And so this world is not anything like what we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
As Jesus said, you know, my kingdom is not of this world.
Yeah.
That guy Jesus was amazing, man. He's doing all this. He's not even 33. And he's spouting this stream of timeless wisdom and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sacrifices himself at great pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
To just show the world who he really was.
Mm-hmm.
It's really amazing. Think about a 33-year-old man doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else before we stop for today?
No, that was it.
All right, good. These are nice questions because it's obvious you spent some time, you know, thinking about them and choosing them.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that they cross cultures, you know, Buddhist and you know, Muslim or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sir.
All right. Yep. Thank you.
All right. More than happy to do it, and we'll talk later.
Yep.
Ciao.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.